I mean, take a look at our society. We're broken. We're destroyed. I mean, it is obvious. It is completely obvious the price the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, paid in this genocide and the level of destruction and annihilation we inflicted on them. This is obvious, and there's no comparison in the price. But then when you try to say maybe it's people versus people, all the Palestinians lost, that it must mean maybe that all Israelis won, then just take a look in the Israeli society and see how shattered and broken and wounded we are, not only because October 7th, and of course it's also because of Hamas and October 7th, but the 2 years that came after and the things we endured as a society by our leadership, by groups in our society, the crimes we committed and then justified, the stories we told ourselves about us killing 20,000 children, but we are being the victim here. All this created a terrible, terrible moral wound in our society.
Welcome back to War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. I am very excited for today's guests. I have Alon-Lee Green and Sally Abed, who are the co-leaders of Standing Together, which is a progressive grassroots movement, dare I say the progressive grassroots movement, organizing Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel against the occupation and for peace, equality, and justice. And yeah, my journey with Standing Together, I first saw you guys speak in November of 2023. I was looking for moral leadership and the opportunity to support people on the ground who weren't frothing at the mouth, racists preaching revenge. So for people who didn't say that the answer to one tragedy was more tragedy, and who actually had a vision for preventing such tragedies from happening again. So I don't know if you guys know this, but you're my rabbis. I'm a member of Beit Omdim Beyachad, which is
very reformed of you to have a Palestinian non-Jewish rabbi.
Exactly. Thank you. So thank you
Rabbi
for
Sally.
Yes. Yeah, Rabbi Sally, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking to the time. So you've been interviewed by such esteemed journalists as Wolf Blitzer and Mehdi Hassan, and I'm not a journalist or even an impartial interviewer. I'm a capital F friend of Standing Together, a card-carrying member. I even have the bucket hat, which is here somewhere, which, yes, I have the merch. So because I'm not impartial, is there anything you want to talk about in interviews that you never get asked? Because I'm just happy to give you the floor.
Wow. That's a
Interesting.
surprise, first of all.
Let's say that we do get asked like everything, which is interesting. But let's think about things that we
Because I
want
remember.
to talk. I'll tell you what, we're really good politicians. I know we're not politicians, but we're really political in a way that, anything that you would ask us, we will just make sure that we say what we want to say. So like, I just feel like we never actually not say what we want to say.
Excellent, Phil, because I know you guys get a lot of questions about like BDS or vocabulary, and seldom or have less of an opportunity to talk about what you're actually doing on the ground. So what does the day-to-day look like?
That is a very, very good point. Most of our conversations that are not in Arabic or in Hebrew and with foreign bodies of the media or whatever, will usually be about our positions and our words, and about positions of others regarding to us. And it can be very refreshing to actually speak about what do we actually do. So yeah, this week, for example, we are implementing our new vision, that we just approved a week ago in the fifth National Convention of Standing Together, which was an amazing big event celebrating 10 years of the movement, but also looking backwards at the last 2 years, making sure we told ourselves how we are after these terrible 2 years, making sure we looked at the lessons to learn from the struggle against the genocidal campaign in Gaza, and the killing and the starvation and the destruction and the terrible processes we went through as a society also, within Israel. And we also approved a new vision, saying that this is the moment to recognize an independent Palestinian state, to join the demand of the Palestinians that is actually getting so much support right now across the world. And this was one thing we did. Another thing we did is the protective presence in the West Bank. We're talking about just, another week where settlers attacked Palestinians in the West Bank. But not only in the West Bank. We see this violence kind of trickling into the Israeli streets within the borders of Israel in Jerusalem. There are a lot of Palestinian bus drivers at in the cities of Israel. There is a TikTok challenge at the moment of Kahanist youth attacking Palestinian bus drivers.
Oh my
So
God.
there's like a challenge on how to do that. And you need to take, the emergency hammer from the bus and to slam the window of the bus driver and attack the bus driver. And 6 bus drivers were sent to the hospitals in the last few weeks. So we are gearing up to do protective presence with our Solidarity Guard in buses in Jerusalem. So yeah, that was kind of our last few days. Sunny.
Mine was a bit different. Mine was very different, actually. We are coming to the end of the year, and it means we have been working on the municipal budget of Haifa. So my work has been very, very focused on municipal work in the last week in terms of my activism, and
Yes,
it's
you are a
it's
city
very different.
councilwoman.
Very different, of course. Basically, the city of Haifa right now is for the 3rd year in a row, basically, since we were elected. It's 2 years, and this is like the 3rd budget that we basically pass. It has been doing really, a lot of cuts, overall cuts, like from everywhere. And the technique that they use, wow, I really never talk about this. The technique that they use, they're like, okay, so we're going to cut from everywhere, because basically once you have a budget that is approved, that is voted for at the council, that's it. It's mandatory. It's legally mandatory. It's to actually execute those budgetary, obligations, basically. So what they say, okay, we're just gonna cut. Like, we're just going to give ourselves a buffer of a couple of millions of shekels, sometimes 10, sometimes, 20, sometimes like crazy numbers. This time it was 45 million shekels, which is roughly, 12% of the budget. That's a huge buffer. They're like, okay, we're just going to cut from everywhere, and not from everywhere, but they choose where from randomly. And then we're going to approve the budget. And then afterwards, after we approve the budget, we're going to allocate those 12%. And like, you're going to fight for it, basically. but it's not going to be mandatory. We're not going to be obligated to have it. It's borderline corrupt. It's definitely very, very disconnected, and we can see also that, it is random. We also see like a big hit on welfare. Especially, we have one of the centers for Palestinian youth, Palestinian young women at risk. A whole center is being closed. We are seeing people who are really elderly, who are at risk, who are alone, lonely elderly, basically, who live alone, who are being at risk. So we have been really working with many organizations, welfare and around that have been impacted by this, to make sure that these cuts don't go through the voting, and we make sure that at least the welfare is one that we keep, and not wait for them, not trust them to give it back to us afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's very interesting, but
It is, especially like what would you say is the connection between the humanitarian and the municipal work? Like, that brings me to your theory of change, which is a 24-page document on the website. But if you don't mind
available in
summarizing
English.
it.
Yeah, and maybe I will say the connection and really summarize our theory of change by saying that the fact that I am leading this, and unfortunately I'm the only council member who is talking about these cuts, especially the welfare cuts. And then I have to go, and I had a conversation today with a Haridi, with Michi Alper, who is like a Haridi a council member from Hadar, and have to talk to, Tzvika Barabi, who's definitely not with me, about Nave Shanan, which is one of the larger, and like people who, wouldn't vote for me and definitely wouldn't, it's not sectorial. I'm not leading a sectorial politics. I'm leading a politics of the majority. And I don't do this because it's my sector, and I think the main idea of municipal politics that we are leading, that is depicting or kind of building the alternative of our theory of change, is the fact that we are talking about a majority. We're always imagining a majority, and talking about a majority in terms of shared interest. And when I talk about welfare, I'm not only talking about the most marginalized, the most, at risk, which is what's happening. But I'm also talking about it in the prism of, this is our interest as people in Haifa to actually, build our resilience, our economic, social resilience as peoples in Haifa. And I think that's what Standing Together tries to do at a much larger, a scale of really understanding. When we talk about peace, when we talk about equality, when we talk about social justice, how do we always talk in the name of a new majority, a new political protagonist in the society in Israel? That includes obviously Palestinians and Jews, but also, much beyond that, just breaking so many different dichotomies and sectors, the politics of sectors.
So the majority is, a person who just wants to live their life safely and make sure the garbage gets picked up on the side of the road. Like, how would you describe the majority?
In Haifa, I could tell you in Haifa that in Haifa, the majority of the people want clean. Like right now, we have a storm here in Israel-Palestine, which, by the way, makes me think of our people in Gaza a lot, and they have been in our mind. And yeah, sorry, we can't say that by passing, but really it has been something that is on my mind for the last 2 days
Of
with
course,
heavy
please.
rains. Um, and and here in Haifa, we don't have the infrastructure for draining, for sewage and everything. So I want, I don't want to, walk on streets full of water and pools and have to get wet. I don't want to be I want just good infrastructure, good streets that are prepared for climate change in winter and in summer. I want to be able to affect and impact my life by impacting the budget, which means participatory, right? Democracy. I want democracy. I want to have the power to actually impact my life. I want good representation, good politicians, good leadership. I want good education. I want a green urban place, and I want culture and beautiful, things around me, and affordable housing and good transportation. And this is what everyone wants. And this is what everyone also needs. And this is what everyone deserves in Israel-Palestine. And all of these little things are usually, we almost don't have the privilege to talk about them, right? But they are life itself, and they are what builds politics. They are what builds real alternatives and real political imagination. This is what peace is. It's the composition of all of these things.
So we talked present day, on the street, door to door issues, and I do want to go further back in time to your political origin stories. For lack of a better term, what radicalized you? What got you into this work when, by every metric, it is not easy or popular?
So yeah, I guess I will go. And I will say that I think there were a few moments in my life, in my childhood, in my youth years, that pushed me into asking questions, into being critical, into thinking critically about the world around me, and radicalizing also in the sense of wanting to see change. So there've been these moments in my youth of growing up in a single parent household. My mom was struggling financially. Then being in the closet, understanding for a few years that something is not right around me. People can mock you, and people can call you names, and you just want to be who you are. And then going out to work, already in early age, and starting working in caterings and restaurants and coffee shops, and then in my last year of high school, I started working more seriously every day. In a coffee chain in Israel that really exploited us and took advantage of us and disrespected the laws, that the workers' rights laws that granted us the right to get paid for extra hours and to get paid when we work on Saturdays. They just didn't. So I tried a few times talking to my boss there, telling him that I know that I should get these rights and I can't see them in my payslip. When he decided to send me work in a different coffee shop, because that's how they do things, there. And if I'm not happy with it, I can just leave. I decided that I will not leave, and I started unionizing the workers in my workplace, in my local part of the chain, and then it expanded into the entire chain across 14 branches in Israel. It got me fired after a few months when the bosses discovered this. We took them to court. I was brought back with a court order. I was reinstated, and then we led big strike that actually won and brought us to sign a collective agreement that granted us all our rights, the ones that were missing from before, and other very good rights that we deserved. And it made me feel a sense of control. It made me feel a sense of, ability for change. I didn't know the theory of community organizing and all the political questions that I did learn throughout the years afterwards, but it gave me the basic feeling that I can do something about reality. And it also gave me the basic feeling that if I want to do something about my reality, I need to search and look for the people that experience the same reality and that we have our rights meeting or our interests meeting. Another very interesting thing that happened in these years is that one of the workers there that was also a representative in the workers committee, there was 1 out of 5 representing around 380 workers. He was a Palestinian citizen of Israel. His name was Nazir. And he started taking me on Fridays to the Palestinian village of Bil'in, which was struggling in these years against the separation wall that was built on their land. So every Friday we went to demonstrate with Palestinians from the West Bank. We got tear gassed by the army. We got arrested and beaten. And I guess that those two stories happening in the same years kind of built a holistic worldview of demanding my rights and recognizing my rights as part of a bigger story of also fighting for people that are not me and that I'm not in their position, but I understand how it's connected. Yeah, and that's how it started for me.
Sally, how about you? What's your origin story?
I'll give you a little joke just because, as you said, this is I never say Alon-Lee has a twin brother, identical twin brother. And at Alon-Lee's wedding, Eli, his brother, in his toast, he said that, I met Alon-Lee in the womb and he was organizing a protest. The first time I met Alon-Lee, he was organizing a protest in the womb. So yeah, I guess his origin story is like
Exactly, fighting for equal rights between the two of you guys.
Fighting to get out first, but,
Yeah.
but lost in 3.5 minutes.
I don't think that's what you're for equality.
Yeah, equal distribution of nutrients.
Of genetic.
Yeah.
Which happened. You were successful. Yeah. Anyways, my origin story is I have some political memories, and I think one of the earliest ones that I have was probably when I was like 11, 12. At home, I used to dance at a ballroom group in Ma'alot, which is neighboring Ma'alia, the Palestinian village I grew up in. And I grew up with a lot of stories about the Nakba, but they were very, very personal to me, to my family, to my village. It wasn't anything that is national or political or politicized in that sense. And I also always grew up not to talk, not to talk about it as political. It wasn't political. It wasn't allowed to be political. And one of the first stories is for one of my, dance colleagues, partners, friends. Her name was Rita, an immigrant from Russia, came to visit me, and when I told my grandma to tell her the stories of the Nakba, and she has really very heroic / tragic stories, she basically shouted at me in Arabic, probably for the first time, and told me, we don't tell these stories to Jews. And I think that was one of the very first, like, very stark, very okay, otherness. Okay, this is the other. We don't talk about these things. And the Nakba is really that taboo subject that you just don't mention. And it's important to understand that growing up, the Nakba was literally, you couldn't say Nakba. Funny enough, it was normalized by the fascist right, when they said that we will do another Nakba. But up until then, it was almost taboo to talk, even to say the word Nakba. Right? And definitely not talk about anything, about a Palestinian identity. And my parents are, government workers. So we were heavily depoliticized in that sense, and conditioned not to do that. And obviously, with that being said, you cannot not be political, right? So there was some kind of awareness of who I am and how I relate to the people that we would visit in Jenin or Nablus when we would go and do shopping there, right? There was something there. I did leave home quite early at 16. to go and studied in high school in Norway, a boarding school. And I did study with many Palestinians and many Arabs from other countries, from Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon and Syria. Uh, um, yeah, there were so many of us. And I remember, not feeling comfortable to go and talk to them. Um, Not feeling I didn't know where I would be. Just it's important to understand that Palestinians, up until social media, for us Palestinians growing up in Israel, we had a very, very huge disconnect, like physical, but also like cultural, political. We had a very huge disconnect. We consumed a lot of the Arab culture and politics, but we weren't part of it, right? We were completely foreigners, almost suspicious to the Arab world. And I remember Ahmad Manasra from Gaza came to me and he asked me, "Oh, where you're from?" And I told him that I'm from the Galilee. Neutral, right? I didn't even know what to say. So I was like, "Oh, I'm from the Galilee, from the north." And then he called all the people in there and he told them, "Oh, guys," like in Arabic, he's like, "There's another Palestinian here." And I remember that being a moment of like, oh, like just like, retroactively, like, oh, yeah, I am Palestinian. Right, true. And I think, obviously that's a very, very powerful memory for me of understanding, like, I never had the space to, or like anyone tell me that, which is insane if you really think about it, right? Like it's insane to think about the fact that we have had almost zero space to engage with our identity and our history and our pain and trauma. Like we have zero space to do that. Today, I do think the next generation, I'm 34, so the next generation is actually more engaging with it, but unfortunately online, virtually almost. And we are, in the movement trying to understand how do we create spaces, physical spaces for people to engage with their identity, history, and trauma and political story as Palestinians in Israel. So that's my Palestinian origin. And then my, socialist progressive story stems from college. I did go to an American college, and I did engage in college politics, including the pro-Palestinian politics on colleges back in 2011, 2012, 2013, until 2015, basically. But also, social justice, Black rights, LGBT, environmental justice. And I came back home not really understanding how does that relate to me as a Palestinian, especially in Israel. And I think standing together saved me. um, you know, uh, Not just uh, um, as a person, as an individual, but as like a young person who has like this urge and need to actually lead a change in her society. And we built that political home together, one that, empowers all of us.
I am very curious about your grandmother's stories and Alon-Lee as well, seeing as the country is 2 years younger than the president of the United States. So you were raised by people who were there at its founding. Did you hear stories of the country's founding growing up?
My grandparents came to Israel at 49 after the war of 48 ended, after Israel was established. And I heard especially stories about them being put in Ma'abara, in these immigrant camps, and being spent like almost a year there and not finding work at the beginning, and then moving to this new neighborhood that they started building in very east in Tel Aviv, and then slowly building their lives until my mom was born in the late 50s in Israel already. And yeah, I guess interesting stories that came through experiences of immigrants. And I also heard a lot of stories about their life as children, um, back in their countries. And yeah, I guess this culture was very strong with them. They kept a lot of the culture, the cuisine and the language. Yeah, they weren't political at all. So there wasn't a lot. They didn't do the army. No one in my family went through that. My mom didn't do that as well. So there weren't a lot of these kind of stories.
We talked about the past. I do want to go back to the present. So speak a lot about changing the reality. Who benefits from the current reality after the 2 years that we've seen? I want to talk about the PTSD crisis, because is the status quo sustainable? If who is benefiting right now? Because we know who's not benefiting. We know the genocide and the suffering. Who is it for? Who is it serving?
I mean, take a look at our society. We're broken. We're destroyed. I mean, it is obvious. It is completely obvious the price the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, paid in this genocide and the level of destruction and annihilation we inflicted on them. This is obvious, and there's no comparison in the price. But then when you try to say maybe it's people versus people, all the Palestinians lost, that it must mean maybe that all Israelis won, then just take a look in the Israeli society and see how shattered and broken and wounded we are. Not only because October 7th, and of course it's also because of Hamas and October 7th, but the 2 years that came after and the things we endured as a society by our leadership, by groups in our society, the crimes we committed and then justified, the stories we told ourselves about us killing 20,000 children, but we are being the victim here. All this created a terrible, terrible a moral wound in our society, not to speak about the economic price that we see, about families struggling to just provide food for their families. Just 2 days ago, poverty report, the official poverty report of Israel was published, and 1 out of 3 children in Israel, 1 out of 3, 36% of the children in Israel, they are dealing with food insecurity and being under the poverty line. We're speaking about around 60% of all the people that go to work, people that are, doing the effort, that are going to work, that are earning a salary, not being able to provide for themselves because of not having good salaries. We're talking about cuts, and we're talking about the new budget that the government is actually passing right now, that is giving almost a fourth of the budget to buy more military equipment and more tanks and jets and missiles instead of actually healing our society and healing, the broken families, or even the soldiers that came back and are committing suicides now without having any infrastructure or any, forms of support by the state. So we're losing as well. And we're losing in a terrible way. But we can also point on some people and some groups in our society, some minorities in our society, that actually benefit and continue to benefit.
Which is the people in power.
Also, yes, those people in power doing everything they can to subject the democracy, or the least, or the few democratic freedoms and spaces we have, to just avoid their trial and avoid prison. But we're also speaking about the settlers that are 5% of the entire society of Israel, but hold so much power, overrepresentation in the parliament, and way overrepresentation in the government. But we're also speaking about some private or public owned weapons companies that somehow became triple and quadruple the size during the war, started selling technologies to other countries that were tested on the people on Gaza, benefiting from the war with Iran, celebrating in the stock market. They're celebrating. And those are like, I don't know, a handful of people. And we're paying the price.
And so what does rebuilding look like? Would you say, would you call it rebuilding or building something new? Like what's on the agenda for the coming years?
I mean, there are things that need to be rebuilt. I think a lot of the we are currently a society that is deeply shaken, deeply traumatized, deeply racist, and unequal. And what needs to happen right now is also a lot of healing, and a lot of, understanding how do we build a space where we are able to see a different kind of option or a different kind of future. And I do think that, we saw that at our 10-year anniversary, our 5th convention. The hope that was held in that room by thousands of people, and the political imagination and the grief and the pain and that was held by that room was extremely healing. Healing and empowering the idea is not just to heal and imagine together, but actually get out of the room, of the people that are convinced, that are able to imagine, that are able to start the process of healing, and actually understand, okay, how do we talk to more people about this option? How do we provide people with the option, with the opportunity to start the healing process and the process of, choosing a different kind of future? And that means many, many, many things. That really has so many different aspects and angles. It also means, organizing people on the very local levels, on local chapters and local communities, and also expanding to new communities that we haven't been in before, and understanding how do we get there and how do we become relevant to them, what matters to them, what is urgent to them, and how do we actually get there and become relevant and be there and be present with them and be consistent with them. And this is kind of a very, very deep organizing that takes a lot of resources and a lot of time and a lot of patience. It's a very deep process of organizing that needs to happen in the upcoming years. And with this kind of organizing, you also need very big mobilizing, very big public narrative, campaigning that talks about the next option, that talks about, the other option, about peace, about Israeli-Palestinian peace and what it means, about the vision. And these two things meet in the middle as well on various levels, right? And we are coming to a very detrimental year with the elections. And I think, one of the main, I guess, roles of standing together at this point is to understand how to we, push the liberal camp, also around the viability uh, um, of peace, but also make sure they are not, just comfortable enough to say, oh, we'll just go back to October 6th, right? Obviously, one of the more urgent goals and missions is to overthrow Netanyahu right now. But overthrowing Netanyahu and having, Naftali Bennett as the prime minister, who was a prime minister for a short while, and he definitely worked very hard to expand settlements and to ethnically cleanse Bedouins in the south and to do many, many, many bad things to our economy. And we need to understand, how do we build an alternative that is competitive enough not only to overthrow Netanyahu, but to also, compete and pull the liberal camp into a direction of peace and social justice within the next couple of years.
Yeah,
Funny. It's funny that some people are like saying, let's see how Bennett is doing, as if we don't have the technology of knowing what he did as prime minister more than a year, and what he didn't do. For example, if we are serious enough about never again witnessing and experiencing something like the massacre that Hamas committed on October 7th, we must be serious enough to also ask what led us to this massacre and to this moment. And for sure, it's the ability or the thought that we can just ignore the conflict, ignore the occupation, ignore the 7 million people that live in our land, and just, put it under the rug as if they can just endure a military occupation for decades and nothing will happen. And Bennett is the archetype of this kind of thought. Let's speak about everything else and continue destroy houses in East Jerusalem, continue evacuating people from the houses, continue bombing Palestinians in Gaza once in every month, but let's say not address it. This is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous.
So yes, on this podcast, essentially, it's about like busting myths. So what would you say is the biggest myth that people from outside of Israel? Is it that get rid of Netanyahu, then everything is fixed?
I think one of the myths that liberals outside of Israel that do support Israel, that do support the Israelis, they want a better life for the Israelis. They tell themselves this myth that only if we replace Netanyahu, everything will be fixed and will come back to the good old Israel. We want to tell them that even before Netanyahu, it wasn't good enough, especially to the Palestinians, but also to the Jewish Israelis. It wasn't good enough. We deserve so much better. And we cannot ignore the fundamentals of what happened when Israel was built, on whose expense, who were pushed aside, who were disenfranchised, who were ethnically cleansed, and so on. We need to address it, because if we want to have a better life, we need to understand what are the things we need to fix and who are the people that we have to work with. And understanding that the 7 million Palestinians living on this land are going nowhere is something we must, look directly at the eye. But the other myth that people that maybe want the benefit and the ones of the Palestinians supporting the Palestinians is that only if we will shout strong enough our fantasies about Israel disappearing or Israelis going back to Europe, or saying strong enough terms like I don't know, pick one of the terminologies of colonialization or decolonization of this land. And only if we will write the essay or present this demand strong enough in the demonstration in the streets of Europe or the US, it will happen. The answer is also no, because the 7 million Jewish Israelis that live on this land are also going nowhere and are also going to be somehow part of this solution. And it is either we're going to find a solution that is benefiting for all the people that live on this land and finding the way to actually live on this land together and prosper together, or we will not find any solution. So I guess this is another myth we need to, kind of break.
Yes, Sally, any other myths that need busting, whether it's internally in Israel-Palestine or that you picked up on the tour?
I do guess those are the two main ones. I mean, there are other myths about Palestinians as well, right? I think just in general, when we talk about solutions, sorry, I was just collecting my thoughts.
No, please. I was going to say, like, do you get the sense when you go to synagogues that you might be the first Palestinian that many people have met? Growing up in Jewish day schools, I heard about Palestinians my whole life, but didn't meet a Palestinian until we got drunk together in my college marching band.
Absolutely, I was very well aware of the fact that I was the Palestinian in many of our meetings. But interestingly enough, in the last tour, that was less and less apparent because there were more and more non-Palestinians in our events, which was very nice and intentional. I think one of the main myths about Palestinians is our very, simplifying our diversity and our demands and our experiences and our backgrounds, simplifying that, making it as we are like homogeneous, we want one thing, but also simplifying our demand as statehood, or what like freedom actually means to us for many people. And I think, what do I mean by this? Let me clarify. For many people, so there's going to be a Palestinian state, so you're going to move to Ramallah, or you're going to move to the West Bank. I'm like, and I think people, many on the more like Jewish Zionist camp in diaspora, they don't understand, I guess, the fact that I experience, what is now Israel as Palestine, as my homeland, right? And I think part of our fight is to exist on the land as equals and freely and in prosperity. And the nationhood, the statehood is almost a reaction. Not almost, it is a reaction to the oppression and to the Israeli state as it is today. And I think that's one of the biggest myths that we need to also break, of what do actually Palestinians want, but also how do we build a future and build a vision, not just out of, a very, very limited concepts of statehood, but really understand, what do we want our lives to look like as Palestinians and Jews on the land? What do we want our life to look like? And I think that gives you so much more freedom and creativity in your vision about what we actually can do and how we can actually exist on the land.
So you're thinking of what day-to-day life looks like, not what the anthem sounds like or the flag sounds like, because that's what people here are obsessed with. It's like
Exactly.
Israel-Palestine as an aesthetic and not as a lived experience. Like, how
Yeah.
often do you walk around thinking
Well
about?
said. Lee.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm honored. Do you have a dream scenario? Are you not there yet? You just want to survive the rainstorms.
Sally actually gave an amazing closing remarks speech in the opening eve of the National Convention, and it was only and strongly about the dream, about what this place is going to be in the political imagination, that we usually just don't allow ourselves to even, open up. And I think it was, I really hope it will be translated into English. It was in Arabic and in Hebrew, but it was very inspiring. It was actually about also the things that it's beyond, living with good salaries and with prices that we can pay and with buses and roads that are good enough and with education system. It was about us in the region, us with, other nations around the Middle East. It was very inspiring.
Yeah, I'd be honored to get the scoop in English.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we envision is for Palestinians to regain the continuity, of the culture and the history and the geographic, belonging to the Levantine, right? As Palestinians to the Middle East, but also to understand how do we define Jewish existence on the land, not as like this fortress that's like, closing on and like defensive, but like open it up and like really define what Judaism means on the land in the Middle East. Like, and it's not even redefine it, it's also reimagining what was before, what does it mean for a Jewish person to exist in the land, right? And I do think that got very heavily distorted, to say the least. And the people who are talking about it, the people who are not seeing borders right now are the Messianic Jews, the fascists, the lunatics. They don't see borders, right? So yes, I did imagine a lot of things in the eyes of my daughter, who's now 1 year old. And, when she's at the age to go to university, for her to have colleagues from Baghdad and from Beirut and from Damascus, and Damascus, and to, have so like art that is just so collaboration of art and academics and music and cuisine, and it's just so much more. And we hold that. We need to hold that. We need to hold that.
Yeah,
While also, weathering the storm, for sure. As you said.
I do want to hear about a bit more about the lunatics, because I'm still stuck on that TikTok challenge that Alon-Lee that you mentioned earlier. Like, oh Jesus Christ! Like, children should be doing choreography. Like, that's what TikTok is for doing dances. But so just how lunatics. Lunatical are these lunatics? Because I don't think that people here understand just how insane it's gotten, and then are surprised when Twitter doesn't allow people to translate from Hebrew anymore, because it means a lot of Hebrew will then compromise the terms and conditions of Twitter, which itself is owned by fascists.
Yeah. So yes, I think that the levels of racist violence and nationalistic violence and just political violence in general is skyrocketing, and it is for sure under the Minister of Police, which is the most racist and extremist minister in Israel, Itamar Ben-Gvir, demanding the police not to act. And not only that, he's demanding the police not to act, not to make arrests. He's actually trying to move positions in the police of people that are racist, that are supportive of the settlers. He moves them up and making them high-rank commanders in the police. And then we see that thousands of extreme settlers committed a violent crime, and they just walk among us, don't even being investigated, arrested. They understand that they can do whatever they want and they will not pay the price. We understand that there is Kahanist youth in Jerusalem that daily is going to buses where most of the bus drivers are Palestinians, and they attack them. As I said, as a TikTok challenge. Sometimes it's giving them a kick and then running away. Sometimes he's punching their face and running away. Sometimes he's dragging them out of the driver booth outside of the bus and starting kicking them on the floor, sending them to the hospital. 6 times it happened in a few weeks. And filming this, putting this on TikTok. Of course, TikTok removes it at some point. Some of them are being scolded by their parents. Some of them not. But no one is arrested and no one is paying a price. And then we hear that there is a government discussion about the rising violence, and what are their suggested policy about it? Showing them videos of how to be good citizens. not using the police, which has the force and the ability and the technology to stop it, but actually speaking about education series to the extreme settlers and to the Kahanists in Israel. That's a joke.
Do you have any advice for people in America who are new to dealing with or not particularly new, but police violence here has also increased gazillion fold and are accountable just to a cult of personality. If you have any advice for us, because you guys are pros.
Sure, we are pros. I don't think you can be um I think what needs to happen is for you. I actually think Americans and many organizations and movements are doing an amazing job, like, and not only in organizing around this, like locally, we saw this when we came, like in various, everywhere we went, there was like an organized, uh, um, you know, civil organization or movement that like did this and like wanted to combat, ICE. And we saw that happening, and it's out of solidarity, but it's also, something that is much bigger than that. It is really about the life and the future, and of people in the U.S. and everyone's future. It's not just to save, the immigrant families, and I think that's amazing. I think we're in this together. I'm not sure. I just feel too humble to have any advice other than do say that we are in this together. It is the same movement. We are part of this larger movement. We are all fighting authoritarianism. We are all fighting, a crackdown on democracy, on human rights, on liberties, on like the very basic rights that we have. There has been a crackdown for decades in the U.S. around the very, very basic rights of housing and healthcare, and I do think that these things need to be connected, because it is connected. It is the same system and the same people who are benefiting from these realities. I guess that's the advice on the bigger political issues, and
We'll
um,
also say that maybe show up. Don't allow any community to be standing alone. Stand together, um, and even if it's starting as just solidarity and support, and then it moves on into physically engaging of protecting presence. Show up. That creates a change. And for us, we do know that when we show up in Palestinian communities in the West Bank, or we show up for the Palestinian truck drivers when they're attacked by settlers going to the border of Gaza, even if sometimes we fail in the protection and the attack happens, there were other people that stood with them and not only people that stood against them and attacked them. And I think that by itself is important.
Yes. Thank you. So what does showing up look like? How can we show up for you? How can we help?
Give us platforms to talk. Thank you for that. um, I think engaging, as I said before, like both strategically as organizers, as activists, as people, just engaging together as partners, open, the gates, and really try to challenge yourselves and engage with as wider of a net as possible, even if you don't agree with them as much as possible, as with everything. Um, and obviously financial, and it's expensive to organize people in Israel Palestine, given the mission, um, and yeah, thank you for giving us this platform. Really cool conversation, Orly. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you. And Alon-Lee, anything to add?
I would say shortly, it is not over. Um, some people say, oh, there's a ceasefire, let's move on. Let's look at other issues or problems in the world. No, it's not over. Not only that it's not a complete ceasefire and people are dying in Gaza or surviving in Gaza without hospitals or education system. Not only that the West Bank is on fire and that the Israeli streets are on fire and that, the next violent eruption is just around the corner. We need a solution. We just can't continue to say that the absence of missiles or bombings is the reality we're seeking. We need to keep our foot on the pedal and to be able to continue to struggle for Israeli-Palestinian peace, for a reality in which we are all free and all equal and all independent. And for that, we need to see the opportunity that still exists, even after the bloody 2 years that we had here. The opportunities that exist in the reality. For that, we need the support. Yes, we need donations. We need movements working together. We need coordination between what we do on the land and what others do internationally. It needs to happen, and it's a moment to just continue and not think that it's just over.
Thank you so much. And I can't recommend being a friend of Standing Together enough. A, actionable, on the ground resources, and B, I've eaten at some incredible restaurants in New York because of Standing Together. You guys brought me out to Barzak Cafe in Crown Heights, was great, and Kanoon, an amazing Palestinian restaurant in Chelsea. So even though I want to fight against the perception that Israel-Palestine activism is just a vibe, just an aesthetic, there are vibes to experience. So as a friend of Standing Together, I'm incredibly grateful for your time, and yeah, hope to see you on again in person on either side of the ocean.
Thank you, Orli.
See you soon, and you're welcome.
And just a quick plug-in for The Long Answer, our podcast.
Yes.
Yes, I almost forgot. Listen to Orli's amazing podcast and then go and download The Long Answer, co-hosted by myself and by Jess Brecker. It's just, delving into very, very difficult questions about Israel-Palestine and really trying to find an answer, or sometimes we don't, but it's very...
But
I think
answer, not just an answer.
Yes.
A long answer. It's not that long. It's 40-minute episodes, but we were hoping to give people a bit more nuance into our work, our thoughts, our theory of change. So yeah, thank you for
Absolutely. I'll link it right away, so you don't even have to search a new window. So yes, between the pastoral care and giving long answers, you are my rabbi. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Orli. Really.
Thank you for listening and or watching War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. Please subscribe, rate and review, tell your dads. We'll see you next time.